Iced Earth with Incorruptible. Perhaps a word that the band would love to have be used to describe their career, which started in 1989. But that, of course, is very much subject for debate. But here in 2017, this is a group that has gone through a lot of lineup changes and a lot of different discrepancies that perhaps have either turned them into the legends that they are, or perhaps prevented them from even greater heights. Now, over the past decade, their albums have been fantastic here in the 2010s. The stoop rock era within this band is definitely one that is been very well received by fans and the band themselves alike. He is a very likable individual, one that is considered to be a brother of the band, and there's even a song on this album that boasts that very idea. Now, this is also an album that you would think perhaps would have a concept behind it, as a lot of times that falls right within Iced Earth's power metal wheelhouse. However, this is not an album that features that. Instead, these are 10 tracks that are, as stated by the band, very individual, not something that is overarching with some sort of, tied together thing. So, whenever you take a look at this, you can kind of understand that right from the get-go. Great Heathen Army, the opening track, almost seems like Iced Earth's version of Tolkien-ish power metal. That there's a little bit of a Blind Guardian appreciation that's taking place on this track. And they do so really very honorably. It starts off with about a minute of sort of atmospheric introduction, something that is supposed to sort of set the scene and set the mood. This might be a little bit too long in order to set this up, because it does take away from a track that only spans about 5 minutes and 19 seconds, but really that's nitpicky, and I don't like doing things like that. So I want to say this was a great way to introduce the idea, and Stu's voice, by the way, if you are not familiar with his absurd vocals, this is a song that will introduce them to you just fine. Then you get the Black Flag, which is about pirates! So we go from Tolkien to pirates. Obviously, there's no overarching theory here or overarching concept. It's something that works for the band, though, considering even though an album such as Horror Show had an overarching idea to it of appreciation of horror icons, it was also one that didn't have an overarching concept that all was tied together. So it's something the band does well, and that album, if you've not heard it, please check it out. It's exceptional. But Black Flag, handling pirates, the lyrics here are a little hokey at times, but it's a lot of fun. This is a very fun track. Once again, the guitars are just rip-roaring, and Stu's voice really is the highlight. It's really one of the big highlights of this album. It's just the way that he powers through this. If you've not checked out his previous work in a band like Into Eternity, certainly do so. Wow. That's all that can really be said about that. Raven Wing is 6.5 minutes, and it's really, Iced Earth has this propensity to always drop something that has a little bit of a softer quality to it, that has a little, it's kind of like what you get whenever Iron Maiden drops a song such as Revelations. It's just a track that has a slower tempo to it that draws you in based off of perhaps a little bit more mood and a little bit more emotion. And Raven Wing certainly is able to do that, going into the Veil and Seven-Headed Whore. Seven-Headed Whore. Very, very aggressive song. Probably one of the most aggressive tracks on the album. Doesn't even crack the 4-minute mark. So this is one that the aggression had to be there in order for this to really, really work. Going into the Relic Part 1 and into Ghost Dance, Awaken the Ancestors, which I felt was a very Iced Earth-like move with this track. 6.5 minutes of a near instrumental. I mean, you do hear some chanting near the end of this track. This is one that really it fills that space wonderfully. It's very well constructed, very well concocted. They've always had great instrumentals behind any vocals that they've had featured throughout the years by men such as Brock, either that, or Matthew Barlow, to name two, or even Ripper Owens. But this is where you see the bands, where you see that framework really come alive and shine whenever they are able to do this with John Schaefer or anybody else that is flowering in the background, able to construct something that has a really great baseline appeal to it, where you almost don't want to hear any lyrics because it would seemingly ruin such a real, free-flowing, free-forming, luscious overall construction piece. And then you get into Brothers, which, as I said aforementioned, is about Stu Brock's connection with John Schaefer in particular, but also the band itself, going into Defiance. And then you get to Clear the Way, which is December 13th, 1862. This is all about the Irish Brigade at the Battle of Frederickstown. And this is an epic. This is nearly 10 minutes in length, and they nail it. They hit this one out of the park. I feel like there's a little bit more that could have been done in order to make this, seem a little bit over the top, but that might have been a bad thing. That's the thing. Like, I say that, but as I think it could have just been the wrong move. It could have just been the wrong move. I think that they did exactly what they needed to do here. So why mess with a good thing? It's not going to seem as instant classic wavering as a song such as Dante's Inferno from way early in their career. But this is a track that at least lays it all out on the table with a very final cut off of an album. Iced Earth understands that idea, that you have to really leave them with something that is going to cause them to remember what they just experienced. So, well done on the part of the boys for that. This is a really well-constructed album. Iced Earth has been on a really good roll here in the 2010s. Some would say that the 2000s was kind of a rough patch for the band. I would kind of agree. But this is another solid 2010s release by Iced Earth. And the fact that it doesn't have an overarching concept doesn't hurt it in the slightest. In fact, if anything, it may have benefited it greatly. This is a 24 out of 30. I highly recommend this album. If you are unfamiliar with Iced Earth as a band, this would actually be a pretty serviceable starting point, although I would also recommend the aforementioned Horror Show, Something Wicked This Way Comes, The Dark Saga. Anything from their 90s catalog is tremendous. And then, of course, once you get into Something Wicked, there's two other albums that go with that from the 2000s that you should check out also. But I want to know what you guys think about this album. What do you think about Incorruptible by Iced Earth? I had to think about that for a while. What did you think about my awesome blunder of Seven-Headed Whore? Let me know. I'm Cover Killer Nation. I'll talk to you guys next time. You guys owe me money.